Disclaimer. The video serves informational and entertainment purpose only. The content is considered speculative and should not be treated as confirmed fact. We encourage you to conduct your research and form your conclusion.
Where Downey Jr. pointed out to both Marvel and Disney that this could not only ruin his reputation, but also cost him fans, and he's against making those statements. However, both Bob and Kevin informed him that taking part in these types of statements and the press tour for Ironheart is built into his very expensive contract for the future of the MCU, mostly related to the return in Avengers Doomsday. RDJ is already challenging both Bob Iger and Kevin Feige that he will only make statements defending Ironheart and Riri Williams if it avoids arguments about DEI.
Yeah, and it's like the real Tony Stark gets like back somehow, and there's like a moment where she's flying through and he's like, "Who is that?" And she's like, "I'm Ironheart, Mr. Stark." And he's like, "I like that girl." And then he like goes to do something else. Like that would be like the level of something that I think would possibly happen.
For over a decade, Robert Downey Jr. wasn't just an actor. He was the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The first face we saw in 2008's Iron Man, the last tear we shed in 2019's Endgame. Before Marvel, Downey was Hollywood's cautionary tale, arrests, rehab, and a career most had written off. But Marvel rolled the dice, and Iron Man became a cultural explosion. Robert didn't just play Tony Stark, he became him. The wit, the swagger, the human flaws, all sharpened by the fact that Downey had lived his own redemption story. Fans connected to him differently. Other heroes came and went. Robert was the constant, the anchor who could carry billion-dollar films and still make it feel personal. And then came Endgame. I am Iron Man. One snap, one sacrifice, one perfect ending to an 11-year journey. When Robert walked away, it felt right. His story was complete. His legacy, untouchable. But in Hollywood, nothing sacred stays sacred for long. As Marvel's box office magic began to fade, Disney's executives started glancing back at the one card they'd sworn not to play again, because nostalgia sells. And Robert Downey Jr. wasn't just nostalgia, he was the franchise's beating heart. But this time, Robert wasn't the desperate actor from 2008. He didn't need the fame, he didn't need the paycheck. And when Marvel finally came calling, he'd have the power to say no. No one knew it yet, but the moment was coming. And it wouldn't be a fight against a supervillain. It would be Robert Downey Jr. versus the very studio that made him a legend.
That they also had Robert Downey Jr. and they had him roll out and really kind of prop the show up and prop the character of Riri Williams up above Tony Stark and really tried to really have him really as the face of the Ironheart press tour, and it really just backfired completely. Bob and Kevin refused, and they are forcing him to make statements to go against Marvel fans that are opposed to the Riri Williams character. Now, RDJ is also very annoyed with Marvel and Disney after they initially forced him to do PR and become a part of the press tour, since it was built into his contract for Doomsday. With the show, per recall, when they forced Robert Downey Jr., they made a deal with him to take part in the press tour to prop up Riri Williams, played by Dominique Thorne, on multiple talk show programs out there, a lot of which were, of course, affiliated with Disney. We'll talk more about that down the road. However, this is where it gets really intense, because we know that Robert Downey Jr. is a very busy man right now. He is heavily involved with Avengers Doomsday.
The Ironheart press event was supposed to be all glitz and celebration. Cameras flashing, banners waving, the cast lined up like Marvel royalty. And there he was, Robert Downey Jr. Sharp suit, trademark shades, that familiar, stark smirk. On the surface, pure confidence. But to fans who'd studied every smirk, every wink over the last decade, something was off. The jaw was tight, the smile didn't touch his eyes, and every so often, his gaze flicked sideways, like he was looking for an escape route. Within hours, social media lit up. RDJ looks tense. Something's wrong. That's not the Stark smile. They were right. Because just days earlier, Robert had been on a private video call. No red carpet, no cameras. With Disney's top brass. Bob Iger, Kevin Feige, the highest levels of Marvel's empire. Their mission? Ironheart. What was pitched as the heir to Iron Man had stumbled hard. Streaming numbers plunged. Reviews were ruthless. Twitter turned criticism into running jokes. Disney's solution wasn't a rewrite or reshoots. It was Robert. Not to appear in the show, but to go on a PR blitz, telling the world that anyone who disliked Ironheart was motivated by something uglier than taste. It was the corporate move Robert had seen before. Change the conversation, make criticism untouchable. But this time, they were asking him to turn on the very people who'd stood by him when Hollywood wouldn't. And that smile at the press event? It wasn't joy. It was a mask, hiding a decision that would ignite the most dangerous standoff of his career. It was just another morning in Malibu. Robert Downey Jr., coffee in hand, logged into a private video call from his home office. On the other side of the screen, Bob Iger, Kevin Feige, a half-dozen Disney executives. This wasn't small talk. This was a mission briefing. Ironheart, Marvel's hand-picked heir to Iron Man's legacy, had stumbled hard. The numbers after premiere week were grim. Streaming views tanked. Reviews tore it apart. Social media turned the show into a punchline. And now, Disney had decided Robert was the solution. Not in a cameo, not in reshoots. They wanted him to go on a full-scale publicity offensive. Every late-night show, every magazine cover, every microphone that would listen. The script they pitched was simple. Praise Ironheart. Call Riri Williams the true successor to Tony Stark. And, most controversially, imply that anyone who disliked the show was motivated by prejudice, not taste. They called it brand protection. Robert called it something else entirely, a betrayal. Because the people they wanted him to scold, those were the same fans who'd carried him through his darkest years. The ones who'd defended him when no one else in Hollywood would touch his name. The room went silent when Robert leaned back in his chair and said the 9 words that froze the call. "Don't ask me to lie to the fans." He knew exactly what that meant. It wasn't just defiance. It was war. And for the first time in over a decade, Robert Downey Jr. wasn't playing by Marvel's script.
Now, already Robert Downey Jr. is enraged with both Disney and Marvel, as well as Marvel fans. Already Bob Iger and Kevin Feige held a recent emergency call/meeting that included Robert Downey Jr. remotely, where they were pressuring him to make a wide...
Here we go. They're now removing reviews, scrubbing reviews from Rotten Tomatoes. Look at this. This was how it started out here at 32%, and now they're deleting the reviews.
Iger, Kevin Feige, and even Dominique Thorne heading into complete damage control to really take control of the situation, and so far that has worked to no avail. Well, this is exactly what's been going on now, to the point where Bob Iger and Kevin Feige are getting involved in a lot of drama with RDJ, Robert Downey Jr.
Disney's pitch to Robert wasn't improvised. It was a textbook corporate play, one they'd run before. When a big budget project flops, you don't talk about weak scripts or bad pacing. You change the conversation. You make criticism dangerous. It happened after The Last Jedi. It happened with Lightyear. It happened with Obi-Wan Kenobi. Suddenly, reviews weren't about the story or acting. They were framed as attacks on diversity, representation, or progress. And anyone who spoke negatively? Easy to label, easy to dismiss. Now they wanted to run that same play with Ironheart. Robert's mission was mapped out in 3 steps. Stand beside the Ironheart cast at every major press event. Publicly name Riri Williams the true successor to Iron Man. Call out the fan base, painting dislike of the show as bigotry. On paper, it was brand repair. In reality, it was a loaded weapon, one that would be pointed straight at Marvel's most loyal audience. Disney wasn't worried about his hesitation. They thought they had him locked in, buried deep in Robert's Avengers. Doomsday return contract was a single line. Promotional obligations as decided by the studio. Translation? If they wanted him to say it, he'd have to. But Robert saw the trap, and he knew exactly what was at stake. If he went along, he'd keep the peace, but he'd fracture the trust he'd built with fans over 15 years. If he refused, he'd risk open conflict with the most powerful entertainment company in the world. And Robert Downey Jr.? He'd already made his choice. For Disney, the beauty of Robert Downey Jr.'s return wasn't just nostalgia, it was control, because they'd built it into the contract. When Robert signed on for Avengers Doomsday, the headline was simple: Iron Man is back. What no one outside the boardroom noticed was the fine print. Buried in the promotional clause was a single sentence with massive power. All promotional appearances and statements will be at the studio's discretion. That meant they could dictate where he showed up, what he talked about, and even how he framed it. In other words, if Marvel wanted him to sell Ironheart, he'd have to smile and do it, whether he believed in it or not. For most actors, that's just the cost of doing business. You read the talking points, take the paycheck, and move on. But Robert wasn't most actors. He'd built his post-Iron Man life around one thing: authenticity. That was why his fans believed him. It was why Tony Stark's death worked. So when Disney tried to play the contract card, Robert didn't blink. He reminded them that while they might own the rights to Iron Man, they didn't own him. And if they pushed him into attacking his own fan base, he'd walk, contract or no contract. It was a bluff most actors could never make. But Robert Downey Jr. isn't most actors. The irony? Marvel had banked its entire Doomsday hype on his return. He was the headline, the marketing weapon, the emotional core. Without him, the cracks in Marvel's armor would show. The unshakable machine would suddenly look breakable. And Robert knew it. For the first time in their history together, the power wasn't all in Marvel's hands. The tension had been building for weeks. Private calls, backroom negotiations, smiling photos hiding cold stares. But then came the Ironheart press junket, the moment Disney had been counting on. Robert Downey Jr. was booked as the surprise guest. The plan? Walk on stage beside the cast, shower the show in praise, and deliver the headline soundbite Marvel could blast across every platform. The cameras were ready. The lights hit. The crowd roared. Robert stepped out, but something was off. He wasn't smiling like Tony Stark. No signature wink. No charming quip. When the interviewer lobbed the expected softball. So, Robert, is Riri Williams the true heir to Iron Man? The room went still. Robert could have dodged. He could have given the safe Hollywood non-answer. Instead, he leaned forward, hands clasped, and said, "Tony Stark doesn't need a successor. He had an ending, and I'm not here to tell fans what to like." The air seemed to leave the building. The host stammered. Disney executives froze in their seats. This wasn't just a refusal. It was a public rejection of the exact narrative Marvel had been crafting for months. Social media lit up before the segment even ended. Fans cheered, critics dissected every syllable, hashtags exploded, and in one unscripted moment, Robert Downey Jr. had done the one thing Disney feared most. He'd broken from the script, live, on camera. There was no walking it back. The clip went viral, the headlines shifted, and Marvel's control of the conversation slipped through their fingers. For Robert, it wasn't about rebellion. It was about respect. The people who had been with him since the comeback didn't deserve to be manipulated, and he wasn't going to be the one holding the knife. The clip of Robert's unscripted moment didn't just trend, it detonated. Within hours, it was everywhere. Twitter, YouTube, TikTok edits looping his words over triumphant music. Fans called it the most Tony Stark thing RDJ's ever done. The press called it a rare crack in Marvel's machine. Inside Disney, it was a 5-alarm fire. PR teams scrambled to spin the narrative, drafting statements, briefing influencers, and quietly reaching out to friendly media outlets. But there was a problem. Robert Downey Jr. wasn't some minor cast member they could sideline. He was the MCU's foundation, and every attempt to correct the story only amplified it. Worse, his refusal had hit Marvel where it hurt most: Avengers Doomsday. The entire marketing plan had been built on his Iron Man return being a feel-good victory lap. Now, fans saw it as a rebellion, a statement. Ticket pre-sale chatter shifted. Instead of hyping plot theories, people debated whether Robert was even going to show up in the movie at all. For Disney, that uncertainty was toxic. For Robert, it was leverage. He didn't rant. He didn't post angry videos. He just went quiet, the Hollywood version of holding the high ground. Every day he stayed silent. The story grew. Every day Marvel stayed on the defensive. The balance of power tilted further away from them. And whether Doomsday ended up being a billion-dollar comeback or the final crack in the MCU's armor, everyone now understood one thing: Robert Downey Jr. wasn't afraid to walk. For Robert Downey Jr., it all came down to one question. Was Tony Stark's return worth the cost? On one side, the biggest payday of his career, a guaranteed global spotlight, and the chance to stand in the MCU center ring one last time. On the other, the risk of tarnishing the most emotional ending in superhero history, the moment fans still talk about, the moment that made grown adults cry in theaters. He knew the math most actors couldn't resist. But Robert wasn't thinking about box office numbers. He was thinking about his own funeral scene in Endgame. If Iron Man came back, it had to mean something. It couldn't be tied to corporate damage control for a struggling spin-off. So he made the call. No press tour shaming fans, no scripted sound bites about the real successor. If Marvel wanted Iron Man, they'd get him on his terms. Or not at all. It was a gamble. Marvel could rewrite, recast, or cut him entirely. But Robert had built his career on the kind of risks that scare other people. And here's the thing. Fans noticed. The same audience Disney had been worried about alienating, they rallied behind him. Not because he promised Iron Man would return, but because he refused to cheapen the character they loved. Whether Avengers, Doomsday breaks records, or breaks the MCU, one truth will remain. The man who was Marvel's heart walked away without flinching. And maybe that's the most Tony Stark ending of all.